This video is about um, class design with regards to um, race classes versus human classes and how Rin does that distinction. It's kind of that's what they call an OSR. I didn't really know what OSR when I first had Rin in mind a long time ago because I've been designing off and on really for 20 years as a hobby, more off than on, but just the last year or two I got it back out. Um, So I'm going to just talk about the differences, and there is kind of I'm thinking about like the OSR movement. I do think Rin has some OSR elements. I don't know if I can quite articulate them, but hopefully they'll come out as I discuss how to do class design. So in Rin, you have 8 core classes, which are human, barbarian, bard, mage, paladin, ranger, thief, warrior, and wizard, and then you have 8 race classes, all of which are non-human. The Centaur Knight, Grey Elf, Necromancer, Halfling, Burglar, High Elf, Priest, Hill Dwarf, Scoundrel, Lizardman, Shaman, Sea Elf, Swashbuckler, and Wood Elf, Druid. And this whole selection is meant to more or less encapsulate a very broad amount of ways of playing. And again, each class has a way of engaging adventure fundamentally differently. The archetypes are very strong. But there's a distinction even between them, between these 8 core classes here, down to from barbarian to wizard, and then the centaur knight down to the wood elf druid, and they approach things, um, half of them one way, half of them the other. So the 8 human classes, um, they're more professions, like professional adventurers. They approach adventure a certain way. Um, the barbarian is a fierce warrior of the waste. Um, the bard is a minstrel. He has magic, fortune, sword play. The mage channels a lot of magical energy through his weapons. The paladin is a servant of the gods. So these are all things that, as humans, they're being very flexible. This is a very old school kind of idea that they're flexible. They can do all kinds of professions and things. They're different ways of skills that they've mastered. Whereas when you're doing the race classes, you're playing something totally different. It's again otherworldly. I use that word a lot, but it's a whole different way of it's a different type of creature. Along with it, that a lot of them have long lifespans. They're just been very monolithic cultures, um, and they're alien to the human world. And so I liken it like in Star Trek. If you're playing a Vulcan, you're not just another crew member on the Enterprise. You're actually like a you don't have emotions, or at least you've suppressed them, or you have some sort of kind of Vulcan mysticism. You're in a different state of being. I guess you could say a little bit like the Klingons to some extent. That wasn't as big of an emphasis, but or like a Borg, like you're a cyborg. You're a different type of creature fundamentally. Or like the Terminator and he's a machine. He doesn't have emotions. He can sit like when he's on the watch. He just sits there for 8 hours and looks out the window. It's a whole different way. You have like I think Data, the android, different type of character. You have Tolkienian elves. They're very different. They're immortal in the sense they have massively long lifespans. That's even longer than the world of Arda. They're very different perspectives. They're in touch with the spiritual world. They're connected to the sun and the moon. Um, Dwarves are these craftsmen who live in these mountain halls. They all stick together. They carve out these areas. They're very, very different approach. And you're playing something fundamentally different, like an otherworldly alien type of creature. So it's really great for role playing. You have your humans. They'll have a camaraderie of being human, and they'll have different ways of adventuring, but they're still human fundamentally. These creatures are different. A centaur knight is something fundamentally different. A Grey Elf Necromancer is very, fundamentally functions differently from not only other race classes, but also certainly humans in general. So, and then one thing in Rin is that the advancement in level, this is another old school approach. The classes advance differently. Now, they don't each have their own setup, like where they're all totally different, but core class adventurers level up, it takes half as much. So basically, you square your current level and multiply it by 100, and that's how much you need. So second level 100, 400, 900, 1600, and onward. Race classes are just twice as much, so 200, 800, 1800. So they're more powerful overall, they advance more slowly, and at the higher levels they could advance. You might just be a level behind or so, but at higher levels you might be, with 8100 you could be 10th level as a human, and you're only 7th level as a race class. But again, the race classes in general are much more powerful. So it's a just you're advancing differently. You're learning more. You just humans are very short-lived. They learn quickly. They develop quickly, but they're not as powerful. So it's a cool difference there. And so I wanted to take a look and just show exactly what it means to be like a profession versus a different way of being. So here's the human warrior. Okay, warrior, you have a attribute spread that fits the concept. Very strong, very high constitution, good agility, charisma and intellect range anywhere from terrible to good. There are with certain tactics you can change that. If you want to be a charismatic and intellectual warrior, you can. But in general, they're not. That's not their strong suit. They're more made for battle. Then you have fortitude, which is just a big hit point bonus, and then also an ability once today just negate outright damage. Just that take that one big brutal hit and shrug it off. And then tactics, just a bunch of moves and special abilities in combat. Um, and there's a bunch of different types. Some of them are more transformative, but for the most part, they're just tactics in combat. And then weapon mastery. So the expertise with weapons, and each weapon he can master differently. He can spend his points differently in each one, and you can have a defensive setup. You can have an offensive setup. Just but it's straightforward. Fortitude, tactics. These are like skills you've honed and grown over the years. So you're good. You're great with weapons. You're incredibly tough, and you've got some tactics you've picked up. And then your proficiencies. Actually, this is one of the warrior actually begins with 2 proficiencies chosen from any core class. So even though he doesn't have any, he's the only class that doesn't have any set proficiencies. He just picks them from other core classes. But proficiencies are so he's a very broad selection, but they're lower. But again, they're just basic skills, specialized skills that he has. Um, and so you can see just a straightforward weapon master tactics. This is a warrior, someone who's trained to fight, trained and skilled, but he's fundamentally a human who's just good at fighting. Grey Elf Necromancer, very totally different type of creature. Even just from the art, you can see this is not. He's either a dark lord, perhaps, or he's a tragic figure where he's kind of like messed around with forces he shouldn't have, and have kind of warped him. Maybe he doesn't really like it. Maybe he's stuck with it. Maybe he did it for a noble reason. However you want to look at it, he's been twisted into something different from what an elf is, but then also just elves are already very different, but he's even against what an elf is. So Grey Elf Necromancer. And again, the elves, they take on the physical qualities of the natural world. So he's living in caves, he's living in caverns, let's say. Maybe he's got this dark skin, like maybe an obsidian mountain or a subterranean pool that he lives next to, underground lake, and so he's taken on the glow of maybe the fire, the furnaces. Let's say there's lava or something. It's changed him. Whereas humans aren't like that at all. You know, they don't change. I mean, they change to some extent. We adapt. Skin can change from sun exposure and stuff, but for the most part, we're not fundamentally changed by nature the way the elves are. Additionally, he's kind of gone away from the elven perspective, which is generally wholesome and good, and he's kind of twisted it. So stats are very different. Incredibly frail, incredibly weak, very agile. A good charisma can go anywhere from below average to really good, and very strong intellect. Very low hit points, very weak. He possesses supernatural dark vision, which is actually rare in Rin. He can see through supernatural darkness, not just regular darkness. He can any kind of darkness he can see through. He's immune to sleep. He has a bonus to awareness, initiative, and stealth. And he has Ichor instead of Vitality. And this is huge, which what that means is it doesn't return. He has to drain life. So his Vitality does not heal after he rests. He has to drain life. So if he's not draining life, he's not healing. So it's fundamentally a different way of approaching adventuring, really, from any class, and particularly from a human. And then he begins with death magic, elven spellcraft, and forbidden knowledge. And these aren't just he didn't just learn to play a sword or learn some tactics. These are very different kinds of powers. Death magic, The wizard's selection of death magic would determines he only has access to necromancy spells, and they're of a little higher power that typically than the wizard. So that's the death magic. He's looked into that, which is normally not a part of elven magic. Then he has his uh, his elven spellcraft, where he has a unique set of elven death magic, which taking his elven nature and kind of twisting it through the death magic and the forbidden knowledge, it produces these emergent qualities. So like deathlessness. He's immunity to fear, poison, disease, paralysis, necrotic, and vampiric damage, and doesn't need to eat, drink, or breathe. He doesn't really, he's just functionally dead in a lot of ways. I would probably put in there he's probably cold to the touch, but again, I try to keep the descriptions fairly low. But he's kind of like half undead, half living. And then he's got these weird disintegration ray, dread resurgence. When he's dead, he just rises from the dead, and he's more powerful the first time he dies. Death lightning, glimmer of light, orb of negation, very powerful. He just negates a hostile magical effect that targets him. Really, really powerful. I mean, pretty potent stuff. A vampiric ray, vengeful ire. After a foe injures him in battle, the necromancer immediately strikes him with a blast of death lightning. He just shoots out death lightning anytime he's stricken. So there's this weird combo of taking the elven his elvenness and being twisted, and then forbidden knowledge. He has this knowledge of death magic, which is kind of common. Human mages can learn this. This forbidden knowledge you can't really learn. So this is giving him the death lightning cantrip, which is unique, and then giving him a bunch of spell points he can spend, and giving him a chance to rise from the dead equal to the percentile of forbidden knowledge. So I won't get into details of how all this works, but it's kind of like this. He's a very different creature. He's an elf. He's kind of half undead. He's messed around with death magic, and he has this forbidden knowledge. So it's a fundamentally different. He might be 300, 400 years old. He might be 600 years old. He might be 100 years old. But he may be an outcast from a society. He may be a group of gray elves who have turned toward necromancy. So he's just again very different from any other class really, and it's particularly just a different perspective on life. You have to drain life just to live. So, and then Eldritch Lore is his special proficiency. One of them, he has it functions like the wizard's alchemy and arcane lore, but only with necromantic magical effects and reagents. He doesn't know regular magic. He can also speak with the soul of a dead creature as if it were living. Number of times for rest equal to 1 plus intellect. So again, the ability to speak with the dead. Again, he's crossing forbidden boundaries, and he can talk with dead things. Creepy, but useful. Enthrall, through the fusion of otherworldly elven illumination and the darkness of vampiric power, the necromancer is able to place non-hostile living creatures into a trance. You can put creatures in trance, kind of like the hypnotic gaze of a vampire, if they're not hostile, and then you will drain life from them without them realizing it, and they will answer questions, and then they will forget about it. They will forget the. So it's a very creepy, strange, monstrous creature. But again, compare that to the warrior. He's just a dude who's good at fighting, and he does have his little wizard girlfriend here because the page spread is the wizard. But other than that, he's just a big hunky guy with a sword. This guy, he's fairly hunky. He's pretty buff for a -3 strength, but I guess that's how it is sometimes. But he's just, you encounter him fairly normal, like, oh, this guy's normal. You see this guy, what is that? And so that's the goal of the character of the idea in Rin between the human adventuring and just you're something different, fundamentally different. And I think if I look at a game like Daggerfall, the character creation system, I can't say that it inspired Rin directly, but just the idea that you can make something totally different in that game. It has the best single player character creator ever. You can be immune to. You can take damage from holy places. You can be immune to magic. You can have regeneration. Even just your experience point requirement goes way up when that happens. You can make this absurdly powerful, or you can just make just a guy. I'm just a thief. Like I just have thieving skills. I don't have anything special, but I level more quickly. And that was like good in AD&D. Like the thieves, they weren't necessarily as powerful in combat, but they leveled quickly. and they could outclass, so they could last longer. They had stealth. A lot of times, the thief might be the only one left if a party gets wiped because he's hidden, he's run away. Um, they tend to endure. So that's more or less a little bit of insights into the philosophy of character creation and advancement. I think when you're doing RPGs in general, it's a great tool. I know, like in later editions of D&D, third and I think fourth was that. I didn't really look at fourth a whole lot. I'd imagine it was the same thing. And then fifth, you're all progressing along the same lines. I understand that they do that. There's rehab reasons for that, but I actually think it's better to have that variety and that fun of I'm a level up, I'm maybe 2 levels up, and I have, so it's just, but then I started more powerful. So this other character started more powerful. It's just, and then when I level, it's a bigger jump up. So it's just a cool dynamic. And again, just the idea of playing something totally different. You're a totally different type of creature. You approach the world differently. It's a real role playing challenge, and how these different, the humans interact, or the dominant race. Again, that's kind of an old D&D thing where humans dominate the world. Again, like really Tolkienian. In the Third Age, the humans dominated the world. The elves and the dwarves were fading. Um, but it's, yeah, this idea, these ancient races, they're very interesting, but they're hidden. They're often the centaurs are often their hidden forest realms. The dwarves are in their mountain halls. Lizardmen shamans often is the swamp. The wood elves, they have maybe a grove or a wooded area where they're protected and you can't come in. Um, it's definitely, the sea elf swashbuckler, the big seaside fortresses. Um, it adds a mystery and a dynamism to the classes and the world. It's really great. So, anyways, that's pretty much what I have for discussions about character class concept and design.